Hey, what's up? Scott Balkum here from Imagination Creation Films, and today we're going to talk about this guy, a polarizing filter, and why you want to use it and when you actually don't. To understand when you should and should not use a polarizing filter, you need to understand how a polarizing filter works. It's quite simple, actually. Light travels in waves. Light travels in actually different axes of those waves. So it may come at you this way, it may come at you this way, it may come at you this way. It may be coming at you from all those different ways at the same time. What a polarizing filter is, think of it as mini blinds. And mini blinds are aligned horizontally in this case. Now, if we rotate it, obviously it changes the angle. But what happens is the light can only get in through the axis of the mini blinds. So you got a wave going this way, it can get in. A wave going this way, it can't pass through. So we use these so-called mini blinds on a filter to block certain polar axes of light. And doing this, it can create richer colors, it can create a more vibrant sky, your clouds will pop, you can eliminate or near eliminate reflections in water, glass, various other substances that are reflective. It can also help dehaze your shot on landscape photography. So one of the interesting things about reflective surfaces in light is reflective surfaces will actually align light, for the most part, to parallel to its axis. So light coming in at a 45-degree angle hits this water right here, it actually will transform and run parallel. Now, what does that mean for you? Well, that means you can actually tune out that specific light and get rid of that reflection, all that light that's bouncing off of there. And again, reflection may or may not be what you want in your shot. If you want to see through that water, well, turn that polarizer will only allow light that is not parallel but perpendicular. So now I'm not going to allow it in. Now I don't get the reflections. Now understand it's not 100% perfect, because if you look around, that snowy mountain over there is white and it's reflecting the sun and it's bringing it back down, which means that's light coming from this way. You may actually get light reflecting back at the angle that you have done. It's not 100%, but it does do wonders. The haze, the same thing. Now, remember, we're talking about when it hits a reflective surface, it bounces off and tries to be parallel to it. Water droplets are spheres. So however that light hits it, it's going to come back at you at the angle that is parallel to it when it hits. Now, a sphere is always parallel depending on where you hit it. So there's a bit of math that's going on. So it won't kill all your haze, but it'll kill off some of your haze. And you just keep turning it until you get that right feel, that right dehazing that you're trying to do. So one of the things about polarizers that you need to understand is they work best 90 degrees or perpendicular from the light source. So if I'm the sun, your camera needs to be pointed this direction to best use the effect. When you point it directly at the sun, it will have almost no effect at all. If I turn it 180 degrees, it will have some effect, but it won't be as much effect. Mostly what you're going to do 180 degrees away is you're going to get all those reflections off of the particles in the sky, the clouds, all the little water droplets. Some of those are going to start canceling out. But 90 degrees is your sweet spot. Another thing you need to understand about a polarizer is that it eats light. It is, if you look at it, you can see it's a little darker than I am. And it eats about 1.5 to 2 stops of light. Outside, this may not be a big deal because you got the sun, it's super bright, it's powerful, but indoors, if you're trying to kill off a reflection, you're going to have to add a little more light to it, or else you're going to introduce noise into your sensor. Another thing to consider is wide angle. So if you use a wide angle lens, you're not going to be covering 90 degrees. You may be covering 30 to 120. You may be way out there. Remember, right in the middle at 90 degrees is going to be your highest effect. Over here, it'll have about half the effect. So what you may experience is kind of a striping that occurs. So it gets darker in the middle and then lighter on the side. Do you want to use it with a wide angle lens? Well, you kind of do sometimes, and sometimes you don't. You have to understand that effect that it's going to do. The best way to kind of hide that is if you can kind of put it to one side and let it kind of be a gradient, it'll help sell it and you won't see it as much. If you can use a narrower lens, that will help. Another option is if you have a super cloudy sky and you're running a wide angle lens, that banding, that darkening in the center will actually kind of hide itself in the clouds and it'll be harder to notice. So keep it in mind when you're using a wide angle lens or a very wide angle lens. Here's something to consider with polarizing filters. These are both polarizers. When I put them in front of each other, you can see through them. If I turn them, all of a sudden, you can't see through it anymore because you've now created a process where this mini blind is this way and it was this way originally. But when I turned it, now I won't allow any light to go through. That's actually the basis for a variable ND filter, which we'll talk about another time. So you need to be aware when shooting through a polarizer into something else that is polarized. Now, a good example of what is polarized these days, car windows are actually polarized a little bit. They have a film in there that helps cut down glare and UV light. Well, it's kind of a mini polarizer. And what happens is, you put your polarizer on there, you're going to get this kind of rainbow burst, or you'll see little spots of rainbows everywhere. And that is due to basically trying to put two polarizers together. Another place that this is very common, in an airplane window. Polarizer, it's not a one-stop fix. You can't just throw it on there and always use it. For instance, you're pointing at the sun, you're pointing away from the sun, you're going to have very, very little effect. And it may actually introduce reflections that you don't want. You're not going to want to put it on when it's dark because you're going to lose more light than you are going to gain from your effect. Now, let's talk about the various types of polarizers. I have a bunch of polarizers. This is a small one. This is a large one. This one is a cheap one from Amazon. This one's a more expensive one. This is a 4x5.5. This is for my larger red cameras. Now, we need to talk about linear versus circular. And why is there a difference? When you're dealing with almost anything in the last 15 years when it comes to digital cameras, they are using the sensor to meter, to get that light reading. They're using it for autofocus. They're using it for a lot of functions that are automatic inside that camera. That is using all of the polar axis of light. So if I stick a linear polarizer in front of there, a linear polarizer is a simple mini blinds. That's all it is. If I put that on there, all of those other polar axis of light that the meter needs, the autofocus system needs, are now blocked and it won't work. So you can't use a linear polarizing filter when you're expecting automatic features to work. Now, if you have a manual camera or you shoot manual, then you don't care. But if you're going to use autofocus, auto metering, anything like that, you're going to need a circular polarizer. So what makes a circular polarizer different? Well, light comes through the front and it is aligned, just like the mini blinds. However, the back has a special coating. This coating actually randomizes that light back into new wavelengths. So that makes these more expensive, but it also makes them work with autofocus, auto metering systems, because you have now taken that light that's going in all directions and you've aligned it in one direction. And then out the back, you've now randomized it again so that it feeds all those systems. Now, one thing to understand about circular polarizing filters is they have a direction of flow for that light before it will work. Now, that's not a big deal on threaded filters because they only thread in one way. But when you're using a slide-in filter like this, it actually says this side out. This side is out, this side is out. When I put it in front of this filter and I turn it, nothing is happening. Why? Because this one is bringing in the light and aligning it. Then it's randomizing it back out on the other side. This one is aligning it one direction and then randomizing it on the back end. So it's not going to do anything for you. If I turn this around, now I'm creating that dual polarizer effect, because the light coming through the front would then be randomized, which would make no difference, and then it would be aligned. And now it is lining up with this one, and I've canceled it out. So it's important to note that when using a circular polarizer, you must make note of which side goes out. This one, it's a plate of glass. So how do you rotate it? Well, when you have a matte box, the matte box will actually rotate. So you rotate like this. I hope this long-winded explanation of polarizing filters helps you understand what they do and what they don't do. So they really will make your nature photography have more vivid colors, more saturation out there, because you're getting rid of reflections and glare. And that glare will kind of wash out your colors. It will help eliminate the reflections on water, and it might help eliminate reflections on car windows. Remember, there are places that you can and cannot use them, or the effect will be canceled out. And then also remember the difference between linear and circular. And honestly, linear is great. They're a little bit more than half the price of a circular. But if you get a circular, it always works. If you get a linear, it may or may not work depending on your camera. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them down below. I do answer them. I try to respond to every single comment that comes down. Please click a subscribe over here and give me a thumbs up if you like this video. I really do appreciate all the subscribers out there. I'm slowly building up a nice group of filmmakers out there, or people who just want to learn, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Also, if you'll click that little alert bell next to the subscription button, that'll let you know every time I upload a new video, because, I mean, you really do want to know, right? This has been Scott Balkum from Imagination Creation Films, and just remember, don't let your life lead your passions, let your passions lead your life.